I think during the pandemic, we've seen a lot of folks working from home, and that's been a good for a lot of, a lot of people. But I think it's also changed the understanding of, employers when, when they've been asked before by employees, can I work from home because I have a disability? Some employers have felt that that's going to be very difficult given the kind of essential job functions. And so how has the pandemic changed that calculus as employers have now seen a lot of folks working from home?
Yeah, I think you're right, David. We've really seen kind of a fundamental shift in the work from home calculus and which positions are capable of being performed from the home. Certainly, as we continue to evaluate what the essential functions of the position are, whether an on-site presence is required, is going to become a much more difficult analysis, given that so many employees have worked from home that we might not have expected.
Maybe you can explain a little bit about what an essential function is and how is that determined?
Sure. So the essential functions of the position are those that are required for the employee to perform. And from the perspective of the Americans with Disabilities Act, a reasonable accommodation is not one that eliminates an essential function of the position. So these are the things that absolutely have to get done. If you're a cashier at the grocery store, right, we can't request an accommodation that doesn't have you at the cash register kind of swiping items. Similarly, as an attorney, if I wanted an accommodation that said I didn't have to speak with clients, that would not be reasonable as a matter of law, right? Because that is the position, that's part and parcel of what I'm being paid to do. So we need to make sure that accommodations just assist with the performance of the essential functions of the position and don't eliminate them.
Can you give me like an example in terms of how the pandemic has changed the fact that, how we define what an essential function would be?
Sure. So I think that the pandemic and the shutdown orders in particular really caused a lot of employers to pivot. One, not only changing their mindset, but two, kind of providing a lot more flexibility or accommodation to employees to enable them to work from home, right? Was it certain equipment? Was it kind of certain changes in company culture, becoming more accustomed to using Zoom and those types of technologies, et cetera? So all of that has really changed over the past year. In addition, when we look at kind of the essential function analysis, there's, like I said, been a shift in our mindsets with respect to how much is an on-site presence or an interaction with other employees required. I think previously that analysis has been tough for employers and for a lot of positions, but certainly where everyone has proven over the past year that they're capable of working from home, that they can be productive working from home, it becomes much more difficult to deny a request to work from home on the basis of a disability.
What about like hybrid function? We're talking to employers a lot about that they are going to be bringing people back to work sometime in the office and sometime at home. So what, some jobs that makes a lot of sense to do that. How does that interface with this notion of wanting to work from home from a disability standpoint? Is it an on and off switch? Do you have to work from home all the time, or can you, also be required to spend some time in the office?
Yeah, so accommodation requests are really driven by the physician's orders and what kind of the employee's medical provider requests. But I do think that you're right with respect to these hybrid arrangements, that there's going to be a diversity of approaches. And it may not be driven by the ADA or any legal requirements, but probably more so by desires to recruit and retain the best talent. Certainly if employees want to work from home or they want to do a 2+3 or a hoteling concept, as we've seen some of our clients consider, that becomes attractive, that type of flexibility, that type of ability to kind of work wherever or in a way that also works for the employee. Most positions or most employees are going to seek that out, and that may be a primary driver in the job market.
We were talking earlier, and you said that you thought there might be a surge of interest in working from home from a disability standpoint. Why do you think that's the case?
Oh, I just think there's going to be a surge in interest in continued work from home arrangements generally, whether they're driven by a medical condition or not. I mean, I've certainly gotten comfortable And I think we've gotten used to having no commute, and being able to empty my dishwasher on the lunch break. So it certainly has its perks, even though I think we all probably miss our coworkers to varying extents.
So how do you respond when an employer says to you, like, what's a good candidate? How should I go about rethinking these jobs? I did this on an emergency basis to let people work from home, but I don't know if I want to do it full time. Whether that's going to make a lot of sense or not.
Yeah, it certainly becomes difficult. And I think the number one question that I keep getting from clients is like, this person is submitted a doctor's note and they say they have to continue to work from home, but they're just not a very good performer. And I don't trust that they'll be able to work from home effectively. And we have to remember that the employee's performance really is not an essential function of the position, right? It has to be driven by whether the job can be performed from home and not necessarily whether the employee performs well in the office. As I say, if we have a poor performer on site, you're right, they're probably going to be a poor performer from home, but we can't punish them on that basis. Everyone has equal legal rights. So that's really a performance management issue and something that employers should be careful of in understanding how they're going to evaluate employees when they're not on site, making sure that the work is getting done when they're at home. But if work's not getting done at home, that's no different than if work's not getting done on site. So again, just a performance management issue and something employers should stay aware of.
Do they need to kind of rewrite the job description from a work, so to make something so it's work from home? What's the kind of the concrete steps that employers should take if they want to rethink these essential job functions?
Yeah, they absolutely should be looking at all of their job descriptions, not so much where they plan to continue to permit folks to be working from home, but where they have employees who they really do think need to be on site. Want to make sure that we're adjusting the job description to reflect that and why. For instance, I think a really good example is often like a human resources professional, right? These are people who you would anticipate need to be available or maybe walking around and connecting with employees or making those types of connections and interactions. And I think it's maybe questionable whether that needs to be done on site, right? I think for the past year, many of them have been working from home, and that's a very close call. And often, probably is an essential function of the position that you have to be able to, have office hours or something like that. And so if that's the case, we need to make sure that that's included in the job description and make it clear that an on-site presence is essential and why.
And what about, is this a permanent thing? So like if I try it out and I have an employee that I think they probably can do their job from home, but I find out that it's really not working out, not from a performance standpoint. It's just like getting back to your point, this person really needs to be in the office.
I think it will depend on whether the work from home arrangement is lawfully required in the first place. If we are, for instance, eliminating essential job functions and kind of making a temporary accommodation, even though it does pose an undue hardship, we're not required to forever kind of go above and beyond our legal obligations. So it's possible we could pull that back. But if the employee's essential job functions can be performed at home, that's unlikely to change over the next months and years to come. So it's really kind of, again, it all ties back to the essential job functions and understanding what those really are.
And what's the best way for an employer to kind of think about that, from a procedure standpoint? How should they be evaluating these job functions?
Certainly, I would hope that my clients are evaluating their essential job functions and their job descriptions in their entirety before they get a request. We can't change the job description so much in response to an accommodation request, although certainly that will prompt an evaluation. So certainly want to do so in advance with an eye towards what can be performed on site and what can be performed at home. I would be doing a holistic review of the organization and understanding, who can do what and where.